The Out of School Time, or OST Collaborative, is a partnership of community groups, community leaders, service delivery agencies, and school boards that have been working together since 2008. The OST Collaborative began in response to concerns raised by local immigrant and refugee families and community groups regarding the increased need for positive supports and programs for their children when they're not in school. The OST Collaborative has since evolved and expanded its focus to include out-of-school time programs and supports for all children and youth experiencing social vulnerability. The goal of the OST Collaborative is to improve the resiliency of children and youth through widely accessible and quality out-of-school time programs. We believe that by being connected to OST programs, children, youth, and their families will become more actively involved in their communities, experience greater academic success, develop an enhanced sense of belonging and identity, and become more engaged Edmontonians. Since 2015, Reach Edmonton has provided full-time coordination and backbone support for the OST Collaborative. The OST Project Manager supports the out-of-school time service delivering partner organizations with their organizational and program development needs through various training opportunities and by coordinating a space for service providers to come together and share challenges, opportunities, resources, and best practices. The steering committee guides and monitors the overall OST strategy and helps to secure funding sources. Current members of the OST steering committee include Bent Arrow Traditional Healing Society, Boys and Girls Clubs Big Brothers Big Sisters of Edmonton and Area, City of Edmonton, Council for the Advancement of African Canadians, Edmonton Catholic School Division, Edmonton Mennonite Center for Newcomers, Edmonton Public School Board, Reach Edmonton Council for Safe Communities, and United Way of the Alberta Capital Region. The OST Collaborative also consists of 3 other pieces: the Ost Funding Committee, the Ost Gatherings, and the Ost Conference and Training Committee. The Ost Funding Committee is made up of the 3 funders that contribute to the OST Summer Program Collaborative Funding Model. Since 2015, the Butler Family Foundation, City of Edmonton, and the United Way of the Alberta Capital Region have used a collaborative funding approach and pooled both financial and human resources to support summer programs. This collaborative funding model allows applicants to apply for and report on one grant instead of needing multiple funding sources. The approach also creates efficiencies for the funders through a joint review and assessment process and awarding of grants. Collectively, these 3 organizations were able to provide $125,000 in 2020 to support summer programs. The Ost Gatherings are meetings that take place 5 times per year, where community groups and service providers who serve children and youth can come together to network, share resources, and eat awesome food. Due to the COVID-19 pandemic this year, the gatherings moved online. Though it was a shame to no longer be able to host these meetings in person, the virtual meetings were still wonderful opportunities for the groups to share information about their programs, their concerns, and to connect with one another in a time of isolation. The OST Conference and Training Committee is a committee that consists of 9 organizations that meet throughout the year to find and develop training in response to the needs identified by the larger OST gathering. They also plan the annual OST Conference, which takes place in June. For 2020, many of the in-person training opportunities were no longer able to take place. Instead, online training and webinars organized by partners were shared with groups in the hopes of providing them with tools and supports to get through these unprecedented times. The 2020 OST Conference also moved online, with incredible contributions from community groups and committee members. The half-day virtual conference took place on June 25, 2020, and offered sessions on physical literacy, how to engage kids online, handling disclosures, and more. With over 170 attendees, our first online conference was a huge success, thanks to all our committee members and presenters, which included Alberta Recreation and Parks Association, Bent Arrow Traditional Healing Society, Boys and Girls Clubs Big Brothers Big Sisters of Edmonton and Area, City of Edmonton, Edmonton Catholic School Division, Edmonton Immigrant Services Association, Edmonton Mennonite Center for Newcomers, Edmonton Public Library, Ever Active Schools, Healthy Schools Lab, Inclusion Alberta, Reach Edmonton, and the Today Family Violence Center. The summer of 2020 had many challenges, but the OST Collaborative was able to provide funding to 12 organizations to run their summer programs. $125,000 was invested in these programs, involving a total of 77 staff, 28 volunteers, and over 500 children and youth. 93% of children and youth reported that they learned something new. 91% of parents agreed their children had learned something new during the summer program. 85% of children and youth reported that they met a new friend at the program. And 98% of children and youth reported that they had fun during their summer program. The COVID-19 pandemic has affected OST programs and service providers in many ways. From needing to come up with creative ways to engage kids online, to thinking of games and activities that keep kids 6 feet away from each other, the OST community has learned a lot during this pandemic. Some of the positive aspects have included being able to reach kids virtually who would otherwise be isolated, being able to engage entire families in programs and activities, and finding new games and tools to make programs a success. The negative aspects have unfortunately included a decrease in the number of participants compared to previous years, including some children who did not have access to any programming at all this summer, and higher costs for groups for things like insurance and personal protective equipment. The pandemic has been an extremely challenging time for all of us, but especially for our children and youth who could not attend school, see their friends, or play. The support provided over the summer to these children and youth who would have otherwise been isolated is invaluable. One of the biggest consequences of COVID-19 this summer was the cancellation of the Joint Use Summer Access Program. Many public facilities in Edmonton, including schools and recreation centers, were closed to students and community groups due to concerns about coronavirus transmission. Without access to a free space, many groups canceled their summer programs or moved their programs online. This created barriers for some children who did not have access to reliable internet or devices at home. Several groups who had the capacity to offer in-person programming struggled to find an appropriate space to do so. Most public areas were closed, and so groups often chose to offer programming out of community parks or school fields that needed to be close to the participants' homes so that they could use their own bathrooms. Both in-person and online programs were also broken up throughout the day. For in-person programs, it was to allow staff to go home to use the bathroom. And for online programs, it was to ensure that children were not sedentary and staring at a screen for the majority of the day. Lots of changes and adjustments needed to be made throughout the summer as well, as restrictions changed and we learned more about the virus. The OST groups showed incredible resilience and creativity when coming up with ideas for how to host their summer programs, and did an incredible job in a time when these programs were more important than ever. The COVID-19 pandemic highlighted many of the inequalities that exist between families, such as access to internet and technology. With school and other programming moving online, many families struggled with access to reliable internet and functional devices. During the pandemic, OST groups came together to provide support and information, helping families connect to affordable internet services, and in some cases, providing new or secondhand devices at no cost to families. Lack of access to internet and technology is still a barrier that many families experience and is an issue that OST service providers are continuously working to address. Many OST groups this summer also acted as support workers for families who were navigating the COVID-19 pandemic, including helping families connect to the food bank and assisting them with applications for income support. Due to the circumstances created by COVID-19, with kids experiencing so much time at home, on screens, and isolated, there have been many concerns about the mental and physical well-being of youth and their families. Home isn't always a safe space for children and youth, and so having emotional support and safety outside of the home within the OST programs has been crucial. With kids needing to spend so much time on screens, making sure they move their bodies and get fresh air has also been a big priority for OST groups. Summer 2020 held many challenges for OST service providers, from finding a space to hold their program safely to navigating the world of virtual programming. These groups showed incredible creativity, innovation, and resiliency while providing invaluable programming to vulnerable children and youth. This led to more collaboration, more flexibility from funders and groups, and innovation and partnerships that will hopefully continue into the future. The summer of 2020 brought to light many inequalities that exist in our community and offered many lessons on what true equity is. The OST groups did an incredible job of providing advocacy and support to families and communities as a whole. Moving forward, we hope to take these lessons into 2021 to make our world a more equitable and just place. Thank you to all the OST partners for all the work you have done and continue to do.